Welcome back to the Bernard Lee Poker Show. We're very fortunate to have our guest this week. He's been on the show before, professional poker player, life coach. He has a site on YouTube, Conscious Poker, and has been living in Italy, which is one of really the hotbed and hot sites for the coronavirus. He has done several videos on his sites, and some of them have been very, very interesting and very predictive of the future. And I wanted to have him on and have him talk about his perspective of not only what happened, but also what's going on right now. We are taping this, just so everyone knows, on March 25th. Because we'll be airing this later on March 30th. So with the world changing so drastically, things could change even from this interview itself. But welcome back to the show, Alex Torelli. Alex, thanks for joining us once again here on the Bernard Lee Poker Show.
Thanks, Brad, for having me. Thanks for the kind intro. I would say one caveat. I wouldn't classify myself as a life coach. I would say poker coach, although with clients, I do talk about lifestyle applications with poker, like money management and those sorts of things when it comes to building a lifestyle around the game of poker. But I just wanted to clarify that. But anyway, thank you for having me on the show. Yes, I'm here right at ground zero in Italy. Actually, the patient number one, so the first patient that was diagnosed as patient one, a 38-year-old marathon runner named Mattia, was in a town called Codogno, which is the cluster town in Italy. That's 24 miles from where I am. So I'm literally right here. In fact, our local hospital was the one that got hit the hardest.
Wow.
So I'm very close, and some of our friends are doctors and nurses there. So very close to what's actually happening here in Italy.
So, being that as the case, and again, if people have not seen your videos and also read your blogs, where can they go find them? Because I really want them to make sure that they can read them.
Yeah, so there's two sort of ways I'm approaching this. Okay, so one is from the poker world, and I've produced quite a bit of content on how COVID is specifically going to affect poker. And I did one about the World Series, and I did one about the poker world in general. Okay, so I did a piece called 3 Ways COVID will disrupt the poker industry. That was the time. 3 ways it will disrupt the poker industry. And I made 3 predictions. One is that there's going to be less demand for poker. One is that there's going to be market pullbacks, which are going to cause people to have less liquidity, and they're going to be more risk adverse in times of high volatility. And the third is that poker rooms would close. Now, I did all this in late February, early March. I got the video out a couple days later because it takes me a long time to get all this stuff done. But it was like very radical at the time. This was a month ago. There were like about a couple hundred cases in the US at the time. And you can maybe see the comments on my Twitter or wherever I posted this, but people thought it was absolutely crazy on all 3 fronts. And all 3 things have happened in less than a month. It doesn't make me Nostradamus. It's just being in Italy, I'm like living in the future. So I can see what's going to happen and how it's going to exactly happen in the US. And I'm watching what's happening here in Italy. And then I'm watching the US play by play repeat, for better or for worse, the exact same things that we're doing here. So that's one way I tackled it from the poker world. But the second way that I've produced a lot more content, I've spent a lot more time on, is on alectorelli.com and on my youtube.com/Alec Torelli. So my personal brand. And this is content about COVID that anyone can apply to. It has nothing to do with the poker world. It's just the macro game plan of what's going to happen and what I predicted has happened. I started producing content around that in February. And I made 9 predictions in February. A lot of those have already transpired. Some of them were quite out there as well. And then I just put out another piece yesterday, which by the time you guys watch this will be a week old. I'm doing a YouTube video about it, which should be published by the time this is out as well. And it's called 7 Things I Learned in Italy About COVID-19 that will happen in the US. So it's 7 new predictions. Okay. And it's about the next 18 months. And a lot of those ideas are going to seem as radical as my first ideas seemed a month ago. They're going to seem that radical today, but I'm kind of doubling down here, building up a little confidence about some of my predictions. But we'll see if they transpire. I hope they don't. But you can learn a lot more about the content there.
Right. Well, I mean, I think the big one to me when you were talking about that was the cancellation. I remember seeing it and seeing the cancellation or the shutting down of the casinos. And you think about it, you're like, that's crazy. Like they're never going to shut down casinos. There's just too much money involved, etc. But obviously, we've seen it. It's happened. That's definitely one of the things that was really unbelievable to even conceive at that point. But of course, all the casinos, they were probably in succession as they went, as each one of them have shut down for a considerable amount of time. We have an incredible opportunity, like you said. This is almost like thinking of Back to the Future, where Marty McFly goes backward in time. If people who are, I'm dating myself now, if people remember the MASH episode where Charles Emerson Winchester would hear the score or the results, and then he would bet on them, and he already knew the answer beforehand. It's almost like that for you. You have the answer in some respect.
Yeah, it's a little bit like cheating.
Yeah, you've seen it. You've seen it a week and a half before it hits us, if not longer. Tell us a little bit about right now what I really want to understand, because we hear all these stories about how when you talk to your friends who are doctors, how it is hitting Italy's health system, which is the fear here in the United States of why everyone's talking about flattening out the curve. Because if you're able to flatten out the curve, then it's not that you are reducing patients at specific times, but you're not flooding the medical system, so that what we have heard in Italy is there are doctors who are literally on the front lines, like a war, like triage, that are having to make decisions about people's lives because they can't treat them all because there's too many people coming in at the same time.
Yeah, that's absolutely what's happening. Yeah. Okay, and what the main thing I want to understand, and why, first of all, what I want everyone to understand is that if you know me at all, or you've watched any of my content, I've put out 500 videos over the last 5 years. I'm like extremely optimistic of a person. Okay, so I want people to know that that's my default bias. And for me to say anything negative is very difficult because it's not the way I see the world. At the same time, poker teaches you to look at a situation objectively and not look at it for how you want it to be. That's right. How you lose a lot of money, when you look at the situation with how you want it to come out, but you have to look at the situation as it is. Okay, so I try to do that here, but the situation with the doctors and nurses is very grave, and that's what's happened because the time, and Tim Ferriss put out a great piece about this. Not that he was the expert, but he had a guest post expert that was like worked in the medical system for a long time, that was also like a mathematician that did some modeling. Okay, and so he modeled the time in which you need to take restrictive action for social distancing to flatten the curve to the point where the hospital systems won't get overrun. Okay, so it's this idea that you have to enact these social distancing measures to prevent the virus of spreading exponentially, because we have exponential spread, which means doubling time every 3 to 6 days.
Right.
So the point in which you need to take these measures is when the hospital capacity is 4% full, 4%. Okay, so the problem is that people think in linear terms. They think 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 30 steps linear is 30. But the way this virus is spreading, where each person can infect 2.5 other people, it's spreading exponentially. So 30 steps exponentially is 1 billion. Okay, so it's 30 or 1 billion. It's a different equation here. So the problem is that when you see a hospital that's 4% full, you're not thinking that you need to shut down your entire economy.
Right.
But if you don't do that with 4%, at least according to this study, you're not going to flatten the curve to the point where the hospitals are overflowing. And the main point, or one of the main points, I made 7 points, but one of the main points in my article, in my recent video, is that tragically, I think the boomerang comes around to the hardest to the U.S. And I've been saying this from the beginning. And the reason is that if you look at the social distancing measures that have been taken by China versus Italy versus the US, and you draw them out on a spectrum, China is the most extreme. With 572 cases, they closed down Wuhan. They closed 60 million people with 500 cases.
Right.
Okay, so they understood this exponential growth rate because China, it's not their first time to the rodeo. They've had SARS and all this other stuff, right? So they know that this is how the virus spreads. So they're very quick to react.
Right.
Italy took very extreme measures early on. Now, people have been critical of Italy for reacting too late, and they say, let's not make the same mistakes of Italy.
Right.
But what I want people to understand is that Italy is in between the US and China. Okay, so Italy is way more towards the Chinese side of things. I'm here. I understand exactly
Right.
what's happening. There's a $5,000 fine for leaving your house and going on a run.
Right.
Okay, so the measures on a nationwide lockdown are extreme compared to what's happening in the U.S. So when the boomerang comes back around, the U.S. has the least social distancing measures. That means the curve is going to be flattened the least. So the math is concerning me right now for my friends back in the U.S. It's why I've been sounding the alarm. I've basically stopped producing poker content, and I've basically spent 6 weeks producing only COVID-19 content so that people really understand the potential for what's coming. And experts expect that New York hospitals are about 2 weeks behind Italy here.
Right.
And
I definitely don't. I'm not trying to make this video and have this interview for my radio show. This is not to alarm the world in the sense of now suddenly mass panic. That's not the point.
Yeah, I don't want people to panic either. Right. I just want people to be prepared.
And that's exactly why I want to have this video, because of what we talked about of this, Marty McFly predictive Back to the Future kind of thing. You've already seen that future from the other side of the world, not that far over the side, but you understand, from Italy. You've seen it. And so I would like people to understand how important what everyone is talking about. There are a lot of people who still we haven't seen this. We've heard about cases. We haven't seen anyone hit very hard. But like you said, it is coming. Now, one of the things that I want to talk about is we're talking about Alec Torelli, a professional poker player who lives at Ground Zero in Italy, in northern Italy. Why do you feel like, and I've seen your video, so you've explained it, but why do you feel like that in Italy there are so many more cases? And it obviously has a lot to do with the testing scenario and also the medical system there. This isn't a criticism, folks. I'm not criticizing. I'm just trying to compare why the data is potentially just slightly different, because Italy has more of a system where testing is quicker and there's not as much expense for each individual, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, they do have more healthcare fundamentally is more of a right, not a privilege in terms of like collective psychology of the society. Now, that's not a judgment.
Right. Exactly.
That's just what it is. You can either think that's good or think that's bad. Again, I'm not here to say what's good or bad.
Right.
I'm just saying you need to look at it objectively. Right?
Exactly.
So this is the situation.
So we can look at the data objectively as well, because we're not really seeing the data exactly the same sometimes when the U.S. is testing multiple times less than Italy. Again, that's not a criticism. It's just that we haven't tested as much right now. Yeah,
so you can't find what you don't test, right? So like you can't necessarily diagnose cases. And in fact, I pointed to a study or something out of Ohio where they expected that 1% of the Ohio population had COVID. They were expecting that based on their models, but of course they couldn't test that. So they didn't know what to do. Like, should they shut down everything or not do anything? And the U.S. has been very behind with testing. If you've been following this along, the CDC promised 1 million tests like 3 weeks ago. My days are all blending together because I haven't left the house in 3 weeks. So it's a little bit like that. But they promised to helicopter drop all these tests. They haven't done it. And of course, when you don't test, you don't have cases. So they in fact, a lot of the experts like Mark Lipsitch, the epidemiologist out of Harvard that did the modeling that expected 40 to 70% of the worldwide population to contract COVID, he's been saying that we need to change the wording that the media uses from documented cases to known cases, because if cases documented, it's one thing, but there's undocumented cases, and that's the thing underneath the iceberg, right? You can see the iceberg over the ocean, but what about what's underneath the iceberg? And that's what, to use an analogy, what people are saying that's potentially happening in the U.S. is the disease is spreading silently and exponentially. And so until we are able to test, we don't know. And that's why I feel like it's also really concerning. And then the other side of that is just the fact that, and now they've come a long way on this, but it was unknown for a long time, at least the cost of testing. But there's also the cost of care and treatment, which is another huge problem. I read that someone got hit with an $18,000 bill. I mean, it's up. Who knows if they're going to have to pay all that, but just the fact that that's a concern that people have. it doesn't bode well for potentially people getting care and stuff like that. So it's really tragic. I'm praying that that none of this transpires and none of this happens, and that we can flatten the curve, and that it's just not as pronounced over there and goes away in summer. All these things, right? Like I'm rooting for all these different ways that this doesn't flood.
One of the few times you hope you're wrong.
In fact, I said that in the beginning of my videos. I'm like, look, this is what I think is going to happen. This is what I think people should be prepared for. But I truly hope I'm wrong.
Right. One of the things that I think would be very interesting to my listeners, especially the listeners and viewers now of people who are here in the U.S., is can you kind of describe your lockdown? You just talked about a $5,000 fine just going out for a run. We aren't seeing that drastic here in parts of the U.S. There are still some states that are in the similar lockdowns, but can you kind of describe what kind of has been going on there for the last few weeks?
Yeah, so I put out a piece of content called "The 5 Things You Will Experience," the 5 stages of COVID-19, basically 5 things you will go through, and it's sort of a response that the people have to the social distancing measures, right? And there's the alarmist stage on one end of the spectrum, and then there's the moral obligation mandatory stage on the other. And you progress through these 5 levels until you go from it being alarmist until it goes to social obligation and mandatory. And I talk about that in the video on the blog. But our society progressed through those 5 stages very quickly because and it happens in proportion to the hospitals being at their limits. So in the beginning, you seem alarmist, which is kind of where we are now in the US. It's maybe progressed to the second stage, which is precautionary. Now it's precautionary. You're not crazy, but you're like, he's a conservative type of person. It'll eventually get to mandatory and socially obligatory, right? You'll eventually have it looked at like someone blowing smoke in your face on an airplane. It'll feel like that. It'll either be illegal or people will just be pissed off if someone's walking by you on the street and they blow smoke in your face, even though it's not illegal. It's like a social unacceptable thing to do. It'll get to that point in the US, in New York and all the places that this comes. So we went through stages and we went through stages on the social distancing spectrum and we went through stages in the lockdown phase. Okay. So we started with these like encouragement efforts, right? Like what they're doing right now in the US. They're like, casually and not casually, they like severely, but they just generally encourage the public to like, hey, try not to go out, try not to be around people. It'll work. It's not going to work because it didn't work here, and it's just. I'm sorry. It's just people don't respect the rules. If you can see these viral videos of people going to the beach in Florida, and it's like it's ridiculous, right? But that's what's happening. They had to close down the beach in Australia. They had to close down the beach in California because people don't listen. Right. They're not gonna like change their whole lifestyle when there's X number of documented cases. The hospitals are fine. They're not going to think that, at 4% capacity for the hospital because they understand exponential growth, the whole economy has to shut down to not flood the system. The people aren't going to behave that way. They're busy. They're doing their things. They want to go get coffee. They want to golf with friends. They want to go to the beach. So we took these intermittent lockdown phases and we slowly progressed from suggesting all the way to the other end of the spectrum, which is, 5K fines and potential jail time and closing of parks because people were congregating in parks. In fact, when we could actually go outside, the city center, ironically, we live in a little city. And if you've been to Europe, you know that there's like 100 walk score. You can walk everywhere in the downtown city. So what happened was because people didn't want to be around other people and shop in the city center, they would go to the parks. So the parks were actually more crowded than the city center. And so like it was ironic, this thing where we were going to the parks and not be around people. This was like a month ago when we weren't going around people at all, but we were still free to go outside because the laws were like that. And they did all these intermittent laws where they said, okay, no going to bars after 5 p.m. Like that was going to stop people from social distancing. Like they just did all these like little half-ass type of things that of course didn't work until they got to the point where they are now. And so now it's like they've had to like really pull back the reins where before you could only go outside if you had a dog. And then now it's like you can go outside if you have a dog, but you can only walk your dog within 200 meters of your house instead of a kilometer. Okay, so like they're keep pulling back the reins, but they're doing it now that the hospitals are at 200% capacity, turning people away without care. And it's like it's what needs to be done, but it needed to be done when we're at 4% capacity. And so, I mean, it's hopefully going to flatten and go down, but that there's all the pain that's happened in the meantime where people aren't getting care and the hospitals are overrun, and you see the death numbers, you see the case numbers. We're potentially not through the worst of it yet. We should see better results in a couple of weeks because it takes 2 weeks of a lag time from when people get the disease to when they start experiencing ICU needed symptoms. So that's why I wrote about this in my piece, that it's called a bet we cannot afford to lose. I did a piece in a video that if we react to what's happening now, we're always going to be behind the curve.
Right.
So we need to react to what's happened 2 weeks ago. And in the US's case, maybe what's happened 2 months ago that we still don't know.
Right.
So it's even harder to make decisions without data in the US. But my point is that the delta between the time that you go from suggesting social distancing to mandatory government lockdown, all that delta is just kind of wasted time. And it's all the time where the disease spreads exponentially and maybe not as much because people can't go out between 5 p.m. and 5 a.m., but they can still go out the other 12 hours of the day. So what do you think they're going to do?
Sure.
So, I mean, my thesis in that piece was that all these things are going to happen in the U.S. and it's going to happen in the same 5 stages. Right now, they're doing the suggestion stage. Now they're closing down bars and restaurants. Eventually, they're just going to keep tightening and tightening, but they're going to tighten in proportion to the wrong information. And the information they're going to tighten in proportion to is the hospitals being full. But when the hospitals are full, it's too late.
Right.
So I'm scared this is going to play out the same way in the U.S. I'm seeing it play out the exact same way. In fact, in the U.S. right now, it's become politicized, which I was saying was going to happen. And the right now, again, I'm not judging anything. This is what's happening. The right is now on the side of let's open the economy, and the left is not.
Right.
And in Italy, it became a little bit like this too, not as politicized, but a little bit. But they had this phase. They had a campaign. Okay, Milan is the business capital of Italy. They had a campaign called Milano si rialza, which means Milan, let's get back up.
Yep.
And it was like this thing, like we did the quarantine for 2 weeks. Now it's time to get back up and go back to work. And so they loosened a little bit their mentality on social distancing. And of course, the boomerang came back around.
Right.
The US is at that stage right now. And that was about a month ago. So I see exactly this same playbook. It's like cheating. I'm sitting here watching, like, it's like I went to go play a sports game and I was there in first person. And then I'm watching the tape. Right. And I'm like, I could tell you what's going to happen in the third and fourth quarter.
Like I said, it's like that Marty McFly. You have the 1950s book. And it's happened also in Hong Kong as well, where they had such an incredible lockdown. They were looked at as a very positive procedure. They opened up the reins a little bit and let some expats and other people come back. And unfortunately, now they're back on lockdown. Right now, I have some friends over there and have been talking with them. And when we come back, we're going to talk more with Alex about his basically, we're looking into the future in some respects through his eyes when we return here on the Bernard Lee Poker Show. Welcome back to the Bernard Lee Poker Show. We are very fortunate to be talking with somebody who is, in some respects, we're talking about him because he can see the future, right? He can see what has happened in northern Italy about a week and a half to 2 weeks ago, and can see what may happen as we start moving forward here in the United States. We're talking with Alec Torelli, and we talked a little bit about how that, like you said, the boomerang effect, and it is now affecting Hong Kong as well. You've had some thoughts about that, right?
So I do. There's a study out of Imperial College, and this is quoted in my last on my Twitter and my last post as well. And it was one of the main theses of my last piece is that and we're seeing this happen in Hong Kong, where and this has been studied through the 1918 Spanish flu as well. When you look at relaxing the social distancing measures, there's a resurgence in the spread of the disease, right? This is like intuitive, this isn't rocket science, but they've done studies about this too. And so the finding out of Imperial College was basically saying that like, this is a mitigation strategy until there's a vaccine. And so they predicted that like the best case scenario is that we have this intermittent lockdown sort of system where we do like 2 months of lockdown followed by 1 month of like a limited functioning economy, right? And what that means exactly, we don't exactly know, but it doesn't necessarily mean It doesn't mean going back to a 50,000
of
person arena,
right,
obviously, but it might also mean like you can go to a coffee shop, but limit it to 5 people. Again, I don't have specifics, and I'm not qualified to say what those specifics are, but it's this like intermittent sort of economy for 18 months. And my thought was on that point as well. And in fact, when I put the piece out, 3 ways this will disrupt the poker world, I said, plan on a year, because I was under the impression it took a year for a vaccine to reach the public. But now now I understand better that it takes 18 months for the vaccine to actually get distributed to the point where everyone can have it. So this is what the experts are predicting. And the reason that I'm not an expert, okay? I'm not a virologist. I'm not a researcher. I probably spent 200 hours on this. That doesn't make me anywhere near an expert. What I don't know is 99%. What I know is 1%. Okay, so I'm very aware of that. I know a lot about poker. I know 99% about poker.
You're what so many people said when we were talking about golf. You're consciously incompetent right now. You kind of know that you don't know everything, but you know a good amount. And so now, I'm not saying that you're incompetent in the sense of that you are now really able to really grasp what's going on, but you're not the ultimate expert, right? You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. I'm not even close to the ultimate expert.
And I want everyone to, I'm sorry to interrupt you, Alex. I really want everyone to understand, again, as we're doing this video and doing this interview for the radio, is that we are not here to spread panic or anything along those lines and doomsday and all that. What we were just trying to do is, people have been talking with me about this and said, oh, wow, I can't believe what's happening over in Italy and China and Hong Kong, etc. And having talked with Alex previously and knowing him, I thought this would be a great opportunity for us to kind of, for better or worse, look into the future and utilize somebody that is in our poker world to talk about this. So I really want to preface this again of what we're trying to do here. We're not trying to spread panic. We're trying to just really understand factual information of what Alex is participating in and going through, so it may relate back to us. Okay, sorry, Alex, I didn't mean to.
No, it's definitely a fair preface. And the other thing I want to say and be very forthcoming about is, again, I'm not a virologist.
Right, right.
But what I do all day is I read what they say, and what concerns me is that the people that know the most are the ones that are the most concerned, screaming from the rooftops. Okay, so it's like that I see, because I read all of them, and they're all in consensus here. There's not like really, I mean, there's people that see different ways this plays out, but it's like it's either going to play out in a way that there's this intermittent economy, or there's just the thing is shut down. Like, I mean, it's not. And what I want people to prepare for is just like, you have to be, and you don't have to be panicked, but you just have to be prepared that it's like our life changes for the next 18 months. It might not happen. Again, I hope I'm wrong, but to not prepare just seems a little, it just seems crazy not to be at least prepared. So that was kind of the one thesis of my article, is that like I just saw a nationwide lockdown being inevitable, and it might come. I understand the right is more on the side of reopen the economy, and they're in power, so it might not come from the national government. It might just be a statewide thing,
right? And that's what's kind of happening.
Denver, and then it's going to happen all over Colorado, and then the states next to Colorado are going to start to do it. And we did that here too. We started with Codogno, which is a small town. I mean, a small town relatively. It's a small town, like 50,000. I don't know exactly, but whatever. It's a town. And then they did Lombardy, which is a big region. Then they did all of Italy, right? So like it did the same thing here. And I just feel like that's gonna play out. That's just it's how it's gonna happen. I think we need to prepare just for that, and obviously pray it doesn't happen. And you're kind of on a free roll, right? Like if you're prepared, and this is one of the main things I wrote about in one of the pieces I put out, a bet we cannot afford to lose, is that if you prepare for a reality and it doesn't happen, it's a free roll. Right. You're prepared. You have some extra food. You eat it in time. It doesn't go bad. Okay, you're prepared. No big deal. Whatever that means. You're prepared financially, prepared mentally. You're prepared with where you decide to spend your time, where you're going to bunker down. Fine. But if it doesn't happen, no big deal. If it happens, you're prepared. But let's look at the other scenario. You're like, oh, no big deal. It's the flu. I'm not going to prepare. It's not going to happen to me. Whatever. If it doesn't happen, you're fine. But if it does happen, you're in the worst out of all 4 of those scenarios, right? So you don't want to be in that scenario. And that's definitely one of the points I would stress to people listening, is just to get as informed as you can. And I think the easiest way to do that in bite-sized content, if you want to just filter a little bit of what I'm looking at, because I spend most of the time during the day looking at this, is I just retweet the best things. Right. So you just follow Alec Torelli on Twitter, and I retweet all the experts, and I share my opinions too. But you should definitely follow the experts. You should follow Mark Lipsitch, Scott Godaleb, forgot who else I'm following on Twitter, but like all the people, the FDA commissioner and
World Health
Alex
Organization, of
yeah,
course. Yeah,
exactly.
absolutely. And
CDC, WHO.
so we had a rush. You know, I'd like to hear in your when you were in Italy, was there this mass panic going to the grocery stores and everything like that? Amazingly, here in the United States, the big thing that everyone was talking about, and I'm not making light of this, I'm really trying to see the comparisons, is we had this mad rush of toilet paper. Like, it's unbelievable to me that that was the number one concern of so many
You know
people in
what's
their
really
minds.
funny? I actually talked about this a little bit and kind of like tried to understand why that didn't happen in Italy. So Italy is one of the not the one not one. I don't know what happened about toilet paper in other places in the world, so that's not I'm not informed about that. But Italy has bidets, which are
Yeah, yeah,
bidets are to wash after you go to the bathroom.
right.
So like there's no hoarding of toilet paper here because it's not
It's
like
yeah,
it's.
yeah,
I mean, we use toilet paper obviously in Italy, but I'm
of
just
course,
saying like I don't know. Maybe that's not why. I could just be like randomly throwing that out there.
right.
People might find that entertaining or funny, but there was no hoarding of toilet paper here. Yeah, the supermarkets you can expect those to.
What was really hoarded there? Besides, so for us it was toilet paper. That was definitely one. I found what was very unusual was chicken was hoarded, whereas meats weren't as much. Like steaks, ground beef, pork. It wasn't. I'm definitely the shopper of the family and the chef of the family for better or worse. I'm not sure if that's a good thing, but I am. And I was amazed at how chicken was just completely taken off of the shelf. It took about a week or so here for we've been pretty much schools have been shut down here in Massachusetts, and again we're talking on this on March 25th. We pretty much shut down on March 13th.
Yeah,
It took about 10 days or so, maybe a little less, for chicken to now. I went to the grocery store, I think a couple days ago, maybe 3 days ago, and the shelves were back to somewhat normal levels.
yeah,
But I was amazed that that was the case. You know, that was just, again, obviously the other thing was a lot of sanitary, a lot of disinfectant wipes, sprays,
yeah.
things like that were completely gone as well. So
Completely
again,
gone. Totally.
perspective from your side, what was that very similar, or was it something different? Obviously,
So
toilet paper, not. Yeah,
we this is hard for me to tell because I actually was looking into this a lot, and so I was social distancing before it was a thing because I was
right.
like, this is exponential spread, hospitals, like like I was just like, this is not good. So we actually stopped going this. Like I haven't been around another person in 5 weeks,
Wow.
so like I don't like the stores were getting hoarded rated after that.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so I've
yeah.
been using online delivery. So it's actually hard for me to say what's happening here. I've seen photos that's been happening around, and I've heard now that flour and sugar are hard to come by. Like people are cooking more at home now, so they're
Right.
baking. So like all the things that people are used to getting out, like for example, like cookies, whatever, they can just buy them out. Like now they're making them at home, and also because people are not allowed to leave the house, so they're bored, so they're cooking more. Like your life changes a lot. So what I will say is I'm very like I would say I'm like very in tune with the online ordering world. So there's a few things that happened. One is that, and I would encourage people to do this if it's not happening in your community. The, what supermarkets have done is they've allowed space for elderly to go to the supermarkets
Yep.
at certain hours, but
Yeah,
that
they're
still
doing that here.
facilitates interaction, right? And the people that are at the supermarkets, like right now in Italy, the only things that are allowed to be open are basically supermarkets because they're mandatory, right? They're necessary. People need
Sure.
food. But the problem is that the people that are working at the supermarkets come in contact with a lot of other people. And that if the elderly people who are at most risk are all going to the supermarket at 8 a.m. and they're social distancing, they're still like, it's not the most like GTO ideal situation. So what a lot of people have done is they set up delivery services for the elderly. And if you're in a community where there's a lot of elderly, that could be a great charity business, whatever you want to call it, to set up to facilitate with the market. So a lot of the supermarkets and a lot of the small businesses that are allowed to still operate have now turned to delivery. All of them have. So
Yeah.
like even our local organic store, for example, that's not like it doesn't have an app. It's not like like an online business. Like they've delivered, and so like you can call the store. It rings to the owner, and they'll just like deliver whatever you want. So we've been doing that for like 5 weeks. And all the supermarkets you can order online, and you can also order on Amazon. But what I will say is the ordering online at the supermarkets has become increasingly like difficult. And so, like, for example, it now takes 6 days to get an order, and it used to be next day. Wow. And this is how it changed in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Not only that, but like in order to get a time slot delivery, you have to check back. Like it sometimes takes 2 or 3 days to find a slot. So like right now, like today I've checked 3 times and there's no delivery for my order. And my order's been in my cart for like 2-3 days.
Wow.
So,
really planning ahead is going to be critical.
Yeah. And what I want to stress here, Amazon too, like things are like, you would be surprised, like batteries take like 2 weeks on Amazon. Glue sticks, for example, like there's 90% of the glue sticks are sold out. I paid a premium for this one where we're like making collages at home. Like people are bored, right? What do they buy? They buy glue sticks. You don't think about this shit, but like you got to think about like nobody allowed to leave the house. What are they going to do? They're going to make collages. They're going to get colored pencils. I can't find paintbrushes.
Right.
Like, I mean, but what do you do all day? I mean, I make content and whatever, but like, you know, like, so, I mean, the things change. Okay. So Amazon takes a lot longer. But the other point I wanted to make is that you're like, well, why is this a big deal? I'll just go to my supermarket, right? I'll just go to my supermarket. You might be allowed to in the US because you might be allowed to, you might not be allowed to. But what I wanted to stress is that 96% of the people in Italy are in favor of the mandatory government lockdown. And when you think about the 5 stages of that I talked about, the 5 stages, we talked about 2 of them on the end of the spectrum, alarmist and socially mandatory or mandated. You're going to be on that you're going to be at that 5th stage when in proportion to the hospitals reaching their limit. But what you're not going to want to do is you're not going to want to take any risks, because if the hospitals are at capacity, you're not going to want to interact with other people.
Right.
You could potentially be very afraid. So you're not going to want to go to the supermarket. You're going to be like, I don't want to take this risk right now. You're also not going to want to do other things potentially. Like people are like, oh, like now they banned like driving unnecessarily. You're not allowed to like go drive to see other family. Why? Because what if you get in a car accident? Right. And like now we have like all the ER necessity for incidental deaths or ER things that happen. Like what if you're biking and you fall off your bike and you break your leg and you need to go to the ER? Like the ER is full.
Right.
So like there's all these situations that are hard to imagine that you're going to be in, and it's hard to imagine how you're going to think about the world until you're there. But I'm here and I'm saying like now I'm seeing. Like I would never have imagined to order paintbrushes, but now what I'm doing is I'm ordering a backstop of all my light bulbs, because like, what if my light bulb goes out and it takes 3 weeks to get a light bulb? Like, exactly. I mean, it sounds crazy, but like, I'm like, shit, it took me 3 weeks to get batteries.
Right.
Like, so, I mean, and again, like we're only 4 weeks ahead of what I'm seeing everything else. The Milano si rialza campaign was like 3 weeks ago, and the US is having that, our 2-week lockdown is over, let's go back to the economy sort of political phase that's coming in vogue right now. So like things change fast. And in fact, when I put out the piece March like 2nd about casinos closing, I literally had everyone say, you are absolutely out of your mind, crazy.
Right.
And like now people are like, oh yeah, of course casinos.
Of course they will, right? Of course,
right. But like the things I'm saying now, I understand they seem exactly as crazy as the things I said a month ago, but they're all happening here.
Right. And I think that's why
everything I said has happened.
Right. And that's why I wanted to have you on to talk about what has one of the positive things that we have seen on social media. I think we saw one in Spain. I think we saw one in Italy. Was this, especially in towns, of this communal kind of sing along. Mm-hmm. Have you had?
We're in the center of a city, so we are in the center. We're not in the countryside. We're like literally in the city center.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
So have you experienced that and seen that?
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. And so like you'll have everybody go on. I mean, you've seen all. Yeah. We don't have the ones as picturesque. I mean, obviously the ones that go viral are the most.
Of course.
Amazing, right? But we have had our own moments of that where like we go out on the balcony, or everyone sticks their head out the window, which my window's right there. But if you stick your head out that window, you'll see like, you know, colored painted building like you would expect to see in Italy. And then so everybody else on the other side of the street and our whole street would come out and they would all clap for the nurses at 5 p.m. and stuff like that. One thing I will say, I know I've been very bearish in this video. Like I said, I'm super optimistic. I hope you can hear it in my voice. Even talking about this, I'm like in a good mood, not because I'm happy about the situation, but just that's just who I am as a person. But like the way that the society has come together, is truly incredible.
Yeah.
And Italy is like more, the people are like more connected. Like everybody is a victim, and they're all want the same thing. Everyone's rooting for the same thing. So like, for example, we've been, excuse me, we've seen a lot of incredible charity and like acts of kindness with people raising money and PPE equipment for our hospital. So our hospital was literally one of the ones that was hit the hardest, if not the hardest. I don't want to say it's number one because I'm not like, it's sort of hard to measure and I'm not exactly sure, but it's top three in Italy, maybe the world. I don't know. So they did a GoFundMe campaign and they raised hundreds of thousands of dollars. And we, my wife's been like total champion. She's been calling all the distributors and providers to get FFP3 masks because they're out of them. The nurses and the doctors are out of them. And they're actually the people that are at the front lines. They're like the war heroes. They're like the people in World War II that are going to fight the war, right? That's like what's happening right now. And these people are the people that are getting the most, transmitting the disease the most, the doctors, nurses, God forbid, because they're like on the front lines, right? So like there are people that she would call that like have these masks, and this is like, their only source of whatever, and this is how they make money, but they would just like donate them to the hospital. So we see all these acts of kindness, and everybody's coming together. Like the whole society is like, let's help, let's do whatever we can to help the hospital. Let's like, the Rotary Club donated a ventilator. So like their whole club came together, right? And so like everybody now is like putting their differences aside to fight for like common enemy.
Right.
And it's tragic to see, but it's also like there's this sense of community that you're like, you're in this together and we're going to get through this. And like, there's just like everybody's rooting for the same thing. And it's there's this like collective togetherness that's great. And that's one thing I hope that really, no matter what that comes out of it, is that people, become closer together. Because the worst thing that happen is that you're divided and there's a virus. I mean, that's just like the worst, the both worlds.
Right. Have you had anyone, and I hope the answer is no, but have you had anyone in your close circle have someone affected?
No, I'm really,
that's great.
Obviously a combination of luck and being a little early to the party, like not going out at all since the beginning, and obviously there's an element of luck to that, but no, we've been really lucky in that regard. Praying it keeps up.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that it has to hit. They talked about it here in the United States that the day, it was March 11th. I still remember the specific day because it affected us on a specific day for our family. But NBA shuts down. NCAA really starts shutting back down, and then of course someone who is famous like Tom Hanks and his wife Rita Wilson get the virus. Now suddenly the world becomes aware of it, and it's unfortunate that the more people who are famous that are affected by it, then it suddenly translates to everyone in the United States of it hitting home when they aren't affected specifically. Obviously, when people are affected with their own family members or friends, but as more and more people, a famous basketball player is saying that his mother, Karl Anthony Towns, that his mother is affected by it and she's now in a coma. Things of that nature. People are talking about it, and now they get more aware of it. And it's it's unfortunate that kind of a tragedy has to create more awareness and more of this lockdown situation. But if there's anything that of good that can come of it, that's the positives that can come of really being aware. I think there are a good number of people that are doing what is necessary to make sure that we are doing the social distancing. But I think that we have to get out there and continue to tell everyone to continue this trend. When you are having 80% of the country doing it and 20%, or I don't know, I'm just throwing numbers out. I don't even know if it's 95 or 5. That 5% is what's continuing to not flatten out the curve as much as humanly possible. And it is a tough time. And we are a very social society. We want to get out there and talk with people. I will say the positive in the world of poker, we talk about casinos shutting down and money being taken out of disposable income being taken out, is that online poker is booming. I mean, really
Crazy.
booming. Even here in the United States, of course, I've had a couple people on recently talking about some of the rogue sites that are playing, and they are booming. But even the worlds of home game, like for example, I'm not promoting it, it's just more of they have a very popular one, Poker Stars home games. People are just wanting to play, even if it's play money or whatever it is, just to get out there. And I will definitely say that's one thing that has boomed. We're not having $10,000 buy-ins anytime soon with regards to that, although they are talking about having events like that, and there's the possibility of, I know that WSOP.com increased their online series here in the United States.
Yeah.
That's definitely something that I see as a trend moving up. And I mean, I don't know if that'll help regulate it here in the United States or not,
Well,
but
it's
it
the best
definitely
chance
has
they
helped.
have because they have leverage now, right? They
Right,
have leverage to
exactly.
say, look,
Look, it's possible, and people are interested and want this, and especially in our society that we have, if you want to increase the economy a little bit,
yeah,
here is a definite way. I mean, we talked about it when the economy was booming. We're talking billions of dollars in tax money that the government will get. Well, if you want a quick way to get billions of dollars, maybe it's not billions, maybe it'll be a billion, but a billion is better than most things that the government is getting right now. And I still think that this is, like you said, it's a great leverage point for people to be able to say, hey, listen, this isn't something we didn't want. We want this.
Yeah, definitely. And I expect in places where it's allowed, you're going to see a big resurgence, and you're going to see that proportionally to the lockdown measures because when people are encouraged not to go out and they still can go out and they can still do all these things, it's like you might not have people playing online poker, especially with the volatility in the markets and whatever. But when people are like quarantined in their home, I mean, remember, people in China were quarantined in their homes a month and a half, and it's a long time. I've been in my home. I haven't left my home, and I've been around a person in 5 weeks, but I left my home for a period of that time. But I haven't left my home in like 2.5 weeks, 3 weeks. I don't know exactly how long, but yeah, you start to I mean, it's a long time not to leave the house. It's weird not to leave the house. So you're going to want to play online poker if you can. So I could see that being quite popular in in the states that it's allowed.
I think, and there's a lot of social It's very interesting. I didn't say this to my son the other day, who's a teenager, but I used to say to him, I want you to call this person and tell them this. In that generation, that means click, 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 done. I said, wait a second, I would like you to call them. And they said, I did. And texting to them is calling. I have seen many more FaceTime calls over the last week than not. They're obviously interacting, whether it's through Xbox or things of that nature. But I have definitely seen more FaceTime calls among my teenage son and my teenage daughter than they have done in the past.
I've never talked to so many of my friends. Also because now, I'm like a source of value, right? I'm like a resource to them, but not being cynical at all. But aside from that, I mean, there's so many more people have so much more time, right? So people are on lockdown, oh, let's jump on the phone for an hour. Why not? It's
who do we know in Italy that we can talk to? Alec.
Yeah, so I'm like a glass half full guy. Another piece of content I'd like to do in the future is just about the amazing things you're seeing in the earth, where you look at the aerial shots and there's no pollution, or the swans are swimming in the canals in Venice. Why does it take a fucking pandemic for us not to destroy our only planet? I mean, there's so many things that I'm not saying this is a good thing at all. Obviously, this is a complete tragedy, it's a total disaster, but there are things we need to learn from this, right? It's just a sign from the earth that hey, you need to stop destroying this planet, right?
Didn't they say that there were fish now in the canals in Venice that were now thriving, right?
And that's after 2 weeks, 3 weeks. So it doesn't take that long for and you see that you see the side by side. I'm sure you've seen this on social where there's the side by side of Wuhan or Los Angeles or San Francisco where it's it's black and then it's green, and then there's no pollution, and you're wow, we can really reverse a lot of the problems and make great improvements to the world. Not that I'm not saying nobody should ever drive, but we need to start thinking differently about how we're treating our planet as well. We're seeing signs of life reemerge after 2-3 weeks. Imagine if we made this a priority.
Right.
And it just shows what we can do. So yeah, what if everyone was like, after this, we're like collectively trying to solve another problem, right? This is like the first time now we live in a global world, right? Before, like, if you have the Black Plague, it affects like one part of the world, but like the American Indians weren't really probably affected as much. I'm just assuming things about history that I'm not super,
yeah.
let alone super. I'm not like the most informed about, but I'm saying like we live in a global world now where like, you have an outbreak of something in China and then it's in Malta and it's in the US. I mean, that's just not the world we lived in before. And also like the whole world is connected now. So like you can talk to me in Italy, like in a second. And so like the whole world is fighting a common enemy. And we're going to have our first, we're going to have our first worldwide hero. The guy who invents the vaccine is going to be like one of the first worldwide heroes, right? Like there's heroes in certain cultures, but there's not like an international superhero. We're going to have that for the first time. So it's like, I'm trying to think of the positive sides of things here. Like the world is going to come together and fight a common enemy. And like, if the world can do that with this, I hope that the world can learn we can do that to fight climate change. We can do that to fight all the poverty. We can do that to fight inequality or women's rights. And there's like a lot of global problems that transcend, you're from this country, I'm from that country, or you're born here, or you're wealthy or poor. Like there's problems that are like everyone's problems because we're humans first, right? So that's like the least. That's the no barrier zone of me versus anybody else, right? We're human. And so when we can come together collectively on those human problems, we can accomplish great things. And I think we're going to see that with COVID. We're going to get through this, right? We're like, we got through the plague, we got through world wars. We're going to get through COVID. It's like 100%, right? It's not going to beat humanity.
It's not a question of if, it's when.
That's exactly. Really so like, I hope that there's this like collection of positivity through the world that like humanity had a victory, and then that it dissipates barriers between races and wealth classes and all this nonsense.
Alex, it has been phenomenal to kind of, I guess, look into the future, right? And as this continues, and hopefully it will not continue for as long as it unfortunately looks like it will, but let's potentially bring you back on in the future to see how it has done and how it has been predicting. Definitely, if you get a chance, follow Alex and read some of his columns, because I think that I read a couple of them, and like I said, if you put it into perspective that he wrote these 2-3 weeks ago, now they seem like, of course, but 2-3 weeks ago,
or a month ago,
that's not the case. That's, it really wasn't the case. And a lot of my videos and a lot of my interviews right now are seeing how quickly everything has changed. Last week we had on Craig Varnell, who ended up being the winner of the 2020 Bay 101. And we talked about how it was happening literally as that tournament was going on, how this has all happened, and wanted to put everyone into perspective that, in today's world, there's like, how could they have had the tournament? That's not the case back then. Let's be honest. People were still trying to figure everything out. Tournaments were not being postponed, etc. It's just, we are not out here to criticize and do this. I am trying to just show everyone how it is there, the facts over in Italy, and kind of really just to see everyone's perspective in this world and showing it in the world of poker. So, Alec, really appreciate you coming on and talking about the scenario. Please be safe, my friend, and I hope to talk to you soon.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks so much for your time. This was great.
I appreciate it. Alex Torelli here on the Bernard Lee Poker Show. We're going to continue having these conversations with people in the poker world and talking about, obviously, the thing that's affecting everyone across the world, like Alex said, and really trying to bring this world together. I hope everyone stays safe. And as always, may you always go in with the best hand, and may you never get unlucky. Good night, everybody.